You're on.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Ed. And it is really a pleasure to be here. And the news that I got about the application being pulled kind of disoriented me a little bit. But my name is John Hasse. I'm a professor of geography and environmental planning at Rowan University. And I'm also a resident of South Harrison Township. I helped my parents build a house on Lincoln Road about 37 years ago, and now I'm living there with my family. My parents live in an apartment in Mullica Hill. And so this is something that is important to me on a personal level, but it also is really important to me on a level of being a resident of New Jersey. This is an important time. And the warehouse situation that we're dealing with in South Harrison is a unique situation, but warehousing is not a unique problem in New Jersey. And we all are part of the problem. I bought something from Amazon the other day, right? It's a new economy, and it's something that is easy to kind of vilify the warehouses, but it is part of our culture that we are very much a consumer society. So we have to deal with that part of it. And I think there's an opportunity here to learn about this, and particularly for our really precious little community of South Harrison to really figure out a way of making sure that we buy locally, that we are engaged with planning and the zoning board and those types of things. So that's going to be what I hope to give a sense about. Now I'm going to be showing a lot of graphics and maps. If you can't see the screen, you might want to scooch over a little bit because it's going to be part of communicating. That's something that I do at Rowan. Is one of my specialties is mapping information about the environment, mapping information about New Jersey. We have a web mapping program that you're going to see a lot of it in my presentation. It's called New Jersey Map, and we have a lot of free information about every square inch of New Jersey that has to do with the kind of things that are important for maintaining the environment, for being able to understand what makes good planning, what makes sprawl. And the director of the NJ MAP program is Katrina McCarthy, and she's also a neighbor, not quite South Harrison, but just right next door in Woolwich. And so a lot of what you're going to see is going to be very map-based. I think maps are really cool, and I hope that you leave this agreeing with that. But that they're cool in that they help us to understand things that we can't see from the perspective of 5 feet above the ground, where our human level. They help us to see things from the 30,000-foot level. So you can see how things are connected. We can see how warehouses in a watershed with a very sensitive environment will impact the entire watershed, rather than just what's in my backyard type of a thing. So that's what I hope to do, is to be able to communicate a bigger 30,000-foot perspective on the situation, to talk about the specific proposal here in South Harrison, and then more generalized this idea of how we do good management and planning of land use. It means getting involved and showing up to meetings, and it means really caring and buying locally, as we're going to see. So I do want to say this is the first time that I've given talks. I lecture every week at Rowan in classrooms. I've been to many different cities. This is the first time I'm giving a talk from behind a bar. So that's kind of cool, right? I feel like, who's the guy from Cheers? Ted Danson, but his name was Sam Malone. Sam Malone, right? And Heather and Dan are going to kill me, but I say, drinks for everyone. No, just kidding, just kidding. So on the house, yeah. So let me get into this. So a few weeks ago, I was asked to give a talk, and gave a talk here. And at that time, I had been loosely aware of the warehouse situation, but very busy with my kids and teaching and whatnot, and didn't really get as knowledgeable about what was happening as I am now. And at that time, what I understood that a warehouse was going to be built, I actually didn't understand that a warehouse was already built. right? That was something that was new to me. And I know the Marino property, and I know they had a packing house there, and I knew there was some development of a cold storage section to it. I didn't know that it was expanded by 3 acres, and it just came online this past year. So that was a real surprise to me. And then I also was shocked to find out that the land use variance was already granted 2 years ago for this, right? So we're not paying attention. I teach this stuff, and I'm not paying attention myself. So this is what is called bifurcating applications, is when developers will do one piece at a time. And once that's set in, you have 45 days to respond to it if you want to contest it, and then it gets locked in. It's law, right? And so we have to be paying attention to these things because that's the way New Jersey land use law works. And the New Jersey land use law is really an amazing thing. And I have to say from the beginning, I am a geographer, I'm a planner, I do have a planning license, I'm not a land use lawyer. So there's a lot of things that legally, I'm just giving you my best, my best understanding, but I'm not a land use lawyer, so I just want to say that. Okay, so learning about this proposed warehouse, now the second warehouse that would be proposed for this property, it wasn't very long before I realized that this was having a potential environmental impact that was quite unusual and unprecedented. And so the more that I looked at our own maps that we develop at Rowan, the more that it occurred to me that this is something that needs to be understood, the deeper dimensions to that. But like I said, really, the warehouses is something that is part of our culture right now, and so we got to deal with it as a whole state, as a whole nation, in a way that tries to ensure that the best outcomes environmentally are attained. So, and New Jersey just happens to have the good luck or the bad luck of, well, what's that saying about what the 3 most important things are in real estate? Does anybody know what that is? Location, 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 right? Well, New Jersey's blessing and curse is its location. And so, if we look at its location on the eastern seaboard, we are really sandwiched. Ben Franklin called us a barrel tapped at 2 ends. One end we have New York City, and the other end we have Philadelphia. Philadelphia was bigger in his day, right? But here we are, and we're seeing New Jersey, Philadelphia here close to us, and then New York up in the northern part of the state. Now the population of the state is more concentrated in the north. We're still very blessed in the south to have a lot of open lands and rural lands, but that's changing very, very rapidly. The port of Elizabeth and Newark is the busiest port on the east coast of North America, and Philadelphia is up there. It's like 3 or 4, right? And so we're sandwiched between these 2 major ports. And so what happens when products come in with the port? They need to be redistributed. They need to find places. And so what you see, if you haven't driven up the turnpike in the last few years, the amount of warehousing that has proliferated is really quite striking. So if we can go up towards Cranberry, exit 8 here, for example, it's really remarkable. Now, what we do, Katrina and I at Rowan, we are map geeks, and we take satellite pictures and we measure all the development that happens, right? We keep track of this over time, and we now are coming out with another report this summer that's going to be talking about what's happened in the last 5 years. And in the last 5 years, up through COVID, things really changed dramatically. In fact, we don't even know what happened post-COVID because a lot of it is warehousing. So this is a problem or a challenge that is really something that is a statewide problem, and now it's starting to bleed down into rural lands, and the impact on the economics of rural lands is very, very challenging. I'm going to talk about that at the end, the impact on farmland preservation and how warehousing messes up the farmland preservation economic equation, right? It just makes it impossible. So, but anyway, let's go to an area that you probably are familiar with, 322 going towards the Commodore Barry Bridge, right? This is a corridor that I drive often with my kids in school. And if we come down here and we kind of go in, and let's see if this gets us into, I might have to do this get the street view here. Trust me, this is going to be worth it, right? What we have here is, this is showing the mapping that we do. It's coming into loading here, but this is showing change over the last 35 years. Pink is area that was already developed in 1986 and earlier, and then all the red that you see the little year flipping there. That's the urban growth that happens. This is Mullica Hill right here, just to orient you. This is Swedesboro. So as you see the red growing, that is land area that is going from an undeveloped to a developed state. And it's a lot. I mean, this looks like little red blobs on a map. We can take the whole statewide. If we took a giant broom and swept all the red blobs together over 35 years, New Jersey developed 377,000 acres in only 35 years. 377,000 acres. Now, New Jersey is only 5 million acres in size. 1 million acres is already is wetlands. About 1.5 million is already developed. So we are developing and changing rural landscapes into developed landscapes at a rate that is not sustainable, right? There's going to come a time where it just runs out. And that time may be just some decades away. All we have to do is look at North Jersey, and a lot of North Jersey is built out. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have development. It doesn't mean you can't have nice communities. It means there's no more open land that could be developed as new land, right? That's kind of the stage that we're in. We here in South Harrison are on the edge of that frontier. And so it's really important for us to be paying attention for now, for these few years or decades, that we do things right with land management. And this warehouse is just bringing this to light. So let's get into that. I'm going to just see if I can get my my street view to work here, right? Okay, did I miss it? Right here, go on. There we go. All right. So as we look at what's happened to 322, it's gone from, and it's kind of interesting. You can do this. This is just Google Earth and Google Street View. You can go back in time and you can see what it was like in 2012, right? And see how these landscapes are changing before our eyes. Remember when 322 was 2 lanes, right? Now it's 4, right? So this is what happens when you begin to have that development. You need to have the infrastructure that supports it. You need to have the roadways, you need to have the sewers and the waters, and you really begin to change the landscape in ways that are irreversible. You can't turn this back into rural lands once you have development happened. Now, development is going to happen. There's pressure, but it can happen in a much better way or in a not so good way. And that's what we want to be paying attention to. And that's what we try to teach at Rowan with our environmental planning program. So, again, this is just kind of fun. You can do this. You can go down your own street and see what it was like when Google mapped it or took pictures early. Now, 322 has a lot of dates. Some roads don't have very many dates because there's a lot of roads. But anyway, when we think about the particular warehouse situation here, the urban growth in New Jersey is now really reaching a point where we're beginning to feel a lot of that pressure just not too far north from here. Deptford and even Mullica Hill has had a lot of development in the last 30 years. And South Harrison has done pretty well. And there's a reason for that. And it's geography, right? And so that reason is that we don't have a state highway. We do have Route 45. It's just a 2-lane road. But we don't have a 322. We don't have a New Jersey Turnpike. We don't have Route 55 with an exit in our town. That's a big deal, right? That makes a big difference. Whereas Harrison Township to our north, 55 on one side, 322 goes right through, 77, 45, and the New Jersey Turnpike. Harrison's done actually pretty well considering its geographic realities, but it's lost a lot of farmland. In fact, Gloucester County used to be one of the top 10 peach growing counties in the country, one of the top 10, and it has long since lost that state because we just don't have the peach orchards that we have. But we do have a success story that we're working on with farmland preservation. Again, I'm going to end that. Now, we do in our township we have no sewer. We have a pretty strong master plan, and I'm going to talk about the basics of planning. Master plan is the vision document, And all of your ordinances and your plans come from your master plan. And so if you have a good, strong master plan, that really helps in doing things like fighting a warehouse. Because if you say, we don't envision warehouses in our master plan, that helps really with the process of planning and whatnot. So our master plan, this is just a quote from it. The town will continue to support farmers and encourage preservation of farmland throughout the township. The township will also expand its role as steward of the land, protecting woodlands, wetlands, stream corridors, and reducing fragmentation of the landscape. All good ideas, all things that I think would all agree with, no matter how you feel about things. I think this is part of the reason that we all love this community is because of the natural integrity that we have. So it's in the master planning. And then the zoning map. What are the legal rules of what you can do in any particular part of the land? Well, our zoning map has been pretty good at maintaining a rural nature. We're going to look at that in a second. And then finally is the Farmland Preservation Program. And this is something that we work on in Rowan. We do mapping for the Farmland Preservation Program. Our students have mapped every single farm in preservation in New Jersey, every little detail. We drive our students crazy doing that, drive ourselves crazy. But the Farmland Preservation Program is something where a landowner really makes a commitment to the land and to the community, to the environment, by putting it into farmland preservation. And so the community really, I think, benefits by making sure that people that are in farmland preservation are really well served, and that we make sure that the farms that are that we have are able to be in continuous farming without there being conflicts with things like warehouses or with other types of things. So paying attention to our farms in farmland preservation is really important, because there's still some farms that are not in farmland preservation. And having it be realized how valuable that is valuable to everyone. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit more. Here's our zoning map. If you're not familiar with it, we should get familiar with it. Everything that's yellow is agricultural residential zoning. That means that there are certain uses that are in that yellow that are listed in the zoning ordinance. And that's the law. And if you want to do one of those uses, you're allowed to. As long as you have the right parameters, you really can do what the zone says. If you want to do something that the zone doesn't say, you can't do it. It's illegal. Can you ask for a special permission? Yes, it's called a variance. All right, so when we talk about the warehouse, we're talking about a variance to something that's not legal in this agricultural residential zoning. Do we have some areas in the town where you could put warehouses? Yes, we have some warehouses along Route 320, along 538 up on Franklinville Road up here, and we have across from the landfill. There's a light industrial zone, right? So there are some places that are more appropriate for that type of a use, where you have county roads that are maintained by the county. We have Harrisonville itself is neighborhood commercial, our quaint little downtown. And then we have some areas that are cross sections where you can have some professional building, some professional offices, residential. Those are the brown areas that you see, some along Route 538 and some of the intersections, right? So it's a simple zone, which is a good thing, right? Some zoning maps are very, very complicated. But it has served us well so far because it has maintained, a plan where a lot of farming can be continuing with minimal land use conflicts. So the proposed location for the warehouse is in the bottom, or the southern western sector of the municipality. It's down near the border with Salem County in Piles Grove Township, and it's about an 80-acre parcel. That's a Merino property, and it's been in Merino family for many generations, and this is where it's located. But it's in the agricultural residential zone. It's not an industrial zone, so industrial warehousing is not a permitted use. Now, this whole question of warehousing, they got to go somewhere, right? And so we have been working on another state committee that has been trying to come up with policy and guidelines. All right? If warehouses are going to be something that's a reality in New Jersey, where should they go? And so there are a set of guidelines that the state has worked on. Now, this is not imposed. These are guidelines, but they're recommendations that are sensibly designed. So we have the places where they should go, which are in green. Warehouses should go in the state plan areas that are designated as smart growth or centers or nodes, the places where you plan and you design for infrastructure. In our state plan, which we're going to see in a second here, there are 5 different zones for New Jersey. Now, it is not a regulatory state plan. It is a state plan of guidance policy, but it's pretty important. And so planning areas 1, 2, and 3 are the areas where things like warehouses are appropriate to go there. Another factor is there the proper sewer areas, right? Is there the proper services such as sewer and city water? Is there access to regional transportation? Are you near an interchange? Are you near a rail line? What about the emergency implications of it? Do you have that worked out? Do you have shared emergency services for the kind of complicated factors that warehousing can pose for emergency responses, especially a warehouse that might be above the average height? What kind of equipment can go up to that height? So those are the types of things that they recommend. And then here's an important one, areas that are permitted by the local zoning to have warehousing, right? They are deferring to the local town. Like, you guys know where it's best to put warehousing. And so they're recommending that be followed. There's a process for planning called the redevelopment areas, or areas in need of redevelopment. Maybe sometimes that's an area that might be an appropriate place. Maybe there's some contamination or a brownfield, and that might be a great place to encourage warehouse development. And then there are places that should be avoided. For example, the rural planning areas. Planning areas 4 and 5. 4B is environmentally sensitive, and 5B is environmentally sensitive barrier islands. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. Areas 4 and 5 are the rural areas, and policies that help rural areas stay rural is the idea of the state plan. How about areas that are identified as being important resources, sensitive resources? For example, flood hazard areas. This is where you should keep warehouses out of flood hazard areas. Freshwater wetlands, very important. Wetlands are part of the ecosystem that are in some ways like the kidneys of the environment. Riparian zones, stream corridors. There's a lot of wildlife management that happens there. There's flood mitigation. Transition areas, buffers between uplands and wetlands areas, stream areas, water bodies, and so forth. Steep slopes. Now, there's a lot of steep slopes in North Jersey. We do have some in South Jersey, usually along stream corridors, the banks of stream corridors. Threatened and endangered species. Believe it or not, even though New Jersey is a very densely populated state, and by the way, we have a higher population density than India. Can you believe that? We do. Right? So we have a lot of people. Now, most of them are in North Jersey, right? Thank goodness. And, it's not quite fair comparing a whole country of India, because that's a very large country, to a state. But it is true that overall, the state population density in India were actually higher than India. So that just puts things in perspective, because we still have a lot of environment that's intact. A lot of resources that are really precious, and a lot of natural habitat and threatened and endangered species. We have a very strong Department of Environmental Protection, because we have so many people making a lot of environmental problems that we have to solve those problems. And so they've mapped the environmental areas where you have threatened and endangered species. And so we have those mapped in our NJMAP program. And then finally, farmland preservation. I keep mentioning that. Farmland preservation has zones. They're called agricultural development areas, where the counties try to focus the farmland preservation to happen. And so the Warehouse Siting Committee says, keep away from those places, right? So that's really helpful. Now, let's focus on what has been proposed for South Harrison and try to compare it with those siting criteria. Now, once again, I was surprised to learn that the permission for the land use variance was already granted. So a lot of those implications of all those criteria, where you should go and where you shouldn't go, kind of are a monkey wrench is thrown in that because of that approval. But let's take a look at that. What's being proposed is a 426,611 square foot cold storage warehouse. And it is proposed to be 60 foot high. Our ordinance for agricultural residential zones says 35 is the maximum height. You can go a little bit higher, but if you go more than 10% higher than that, you need to get a variance. And so they're asking for a variance to go up to 60 feet. Building coverage. In our agricultural residential zone, you can cover with a building 10% of your lot. Now, 10% is not an arbitrary number. 10% of impervious surface is where you start to see environmental impact to watersheds. If you start covering more than 10% of your watershed, your water quality goes down. And so 10% is a good number. And I was happy that the South Harrison ordinances have a 10% maximum. Some other towns are much higher, right? So 10% is a good number. They want to create a building that is 21.9% of building coverage of the lot. So they're asking for a variance on that. And then they're asking for some other stuff. Less parking than the zoning ordinance requires, because the building's so big, you have to have a parking spot for every so many square feet. And they're saying they only need 358 parking spots, not the 782 required, right? So that's a big, well, 782 is just a large number of parking spots, which just gives you a sense of how large this building is, right? And maybe they don't need that many, but you know, having fewer parking spots means they can have a bigger building. I think that's part of why they're asking for fewer parking spots. And there's going to be 64 truck loading berths, okay, on top of the 30 that are already in the existing building. So in total, between the two buildings, there will be almost 100 loading berths. So all that was interesting knowledge to learn about this proposal. And I'm going to quickly give you a little bit of well, this is a slide from one of my planning classes, right? Just like, how does this work? How does a zoning variance work? Like, what are we talking about here? And because I think a lot of warehouse protests just are emotional, and they don't understand, and you might not be very effective. You might have a large emotional response to something that you don't like, but that's not going to be effective for changing how planning happens. So we're going to do a quick New Jersey Planning 101, and then I'm going to give you a test afterwards and see if you do better than my students. All right? Katrina, get those test things available. So first of all, everything starts with the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law. It's the state of New Jersey has the power for everything that we do. The federal government gives New Jersey powers to be a state. And then the state itself says, all right, well, we don't really want to do everything, so let's give some powers to counties and to municipalities. And in fact, New Jersey gives more power to local municipalities than any other state in the country. It's called home rule, right? Now, some other places have, some local municipal policies. Every single town in New Jersey has home rule. 564 towns have their own planning board, their own zoning board, their own school system. You want to know why your taxes are so high here? Because everybody wants to have their own town, right? And we want to do our own thing. And that means all these repetitive services, where a lot of other states do things on county levels. We have weak county government in our state, right? So that's just a little factoid. Everything comes from the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law. And in part of that municipal land use law, it tells municipalities everything you could do very specifically. You can't do things that aren't in the land use law as far as managing your land. So the one thing it says is you have to have a master plan. You have to have a vision document. You get to write it, but you have to have one, and it has to have certain elements in it, including your housing and your environment, and you can have an open space plan and lots of stuff that you can put in your master plan, but that is your vision document. If we don't like what's in the master plan, you revise it every 10 years. You could do it even sooner if you want to, but it's up to the town to make sure that their master plan really reflects the values of the community. And then the master plan has a bunch of ordinances. Ordinances are the name for laws at a local level. And so those ordinances try to say, okay, how do we make the stuff in the master plan happen? And so we have ordinances in South Harrison, and they are the law, right? How many people can you have in this room? There's an ordinance that says how many you can have. And one of the things in the ordinance is the land use element. And the land use element has a legal map called the zoning map that we already looked at. And so the zoning map is a legal document, right? It holds the force of law of our ordinances. And then there is overseen by, since we're a small town, we have a planning board and a zoning board merged together called a joint planning land use board. And some of the smaller towns are like that in New Jersey. Those boards are the ones that decide what the zoning map should be, and then they hear cases of variances. Normally, a zoning board would just hear cases on variances because a zoning board is a little court of law. It has the power of law. And so the outcomes of a zoning hearing are law, right? That's why the land use variance for the industrial use in the agricultural zone became law because our zoning dimension of our joint board said we approve of this. And the municipal land use law says exactly how you have to do that. It tells you that you have to do it in a certain way. I'll talk about that in a second. The land use law also tells how you create a planning zoning board, who the members are. It's all prescribed by the land use law. You can't do it differently. And what it says in there is many of the members are appointed by the mayor, the township committee, but essentially the mayor. It also says you can have environmental commission, and that's a really good thing. But guess what? Our environmental commission has not been very active in the last couple of years. So, we can have one, but you don't have to have one. It doesn't have the force of law like a zoning board, but it's advisory to the zoning board. If we had an active environmental commission, it should have heard every one of these different variances that were passed, and it should have made comment on it. And that's where this could have been headed off before it became all complicated like it is now. Okay, so I think that's one positive outcome. I've heard that the Environmental Commission, there's some energy to maybe reconstitute it here in South Harrison, and I think that's a good thing. All right, you ready for the test? Fred's passing it around. Is that the test? No. All right, halfway through the boring stuff, we're going to have Variance 101. How does this work? If you're going to get a zoning variance, you can only do what the zone says you can do. That's what you have by right. If you want to do something that the zone says that is not illegal, you have to ask for a variance. If it's not described in the zoning ordinances, it's just not allowed, period. And we don't have to give permission to do it, but usually you want to work with people that are your community members. And so, but it's very, very specific. It's special permission to do something that deviates from the land use zone. And to do that, it can't be just for any reason at all. It has to be for specific reasons. What kind of variances are there? Well, there's a use variance. That's the big one. That's the D1, right? You have this use and you want to do something else. And sometimes it makes sense. You have a residential, you're next to maybe a commercial, and that last residential you want to turn into a restaurant or something like that. So you go to the board and say, look, I'm next to a commercial. I'm not really going to change the residential too much. Can you, I have a hardship. I can't really sell it. Nobody wants to be next to another restaurant. So you need a hardship or a reason for the variance. And then you ask for permission, and the zoning board will go through the criteria for that, right? So you can get a variance for height, as we see that we're doing. You can get a variance for coverage, a variance for what's called bulk, how close you can be to a boundary line and that type of a thing. So those are variances. And the applicant, the person asking for the variance, makes official proposal that has to go through and have all the checklists and whatnot. And you have to have a hardship, a reason why you're asking for the variance that can be heard by the board. The board has legal power. It's a little court of law, right? So that's pretty interesting. So volunteers on the planning board, and I hope that you might want to be interested in doing that in the future. It's a responsibility, right? You are a little judge, and so to do it right is really an honor, but an important thing, because the decisions are legally binding. Now, a C, there's kind of different variances. C is like not the really important ones. That's the one where you're building too close to a property line or something like that. That can only go. That typically is a lower standard. It's the D variances, the big ones. Change of use, like you're really going to change a zone. Change of height, change of coverage. They're called D, and they have a higher standard. You have to have a supermajority of the planning board, zoning board to have that pass. So if it's a 7-member board, you have to have 5 for that to pass. And more importantly, it has to be 2 factors are the only thing you can consider according to the New Jersey land use law: the positive criteria and the negative criteria. Right? You can't just say yes or no whether you like the use or not, whether you're friendly with the applicant. You can only make a decision on 2 things. Positive criteria: does it promote what the zoning ordinance would have done anyway? Right? Is it okay with what the zoning ordinance would have done? Or does it promote what the municipal land use law, New Jersey state law, has goals? Does it promote one of those goals? If it does something like that, that's the positive thing, you check that off. You can say, all right, we can see and make an argument that has a positive possibility to it. But then 2, negative, you can't do something that does public harm. Right? Is there anything about this that does public harm? And if you find something that does public harm, you have to vote no. Right? So what you're going to see is that when somebody makes an application, they're going to make an argument about how there's positive criteria and how the negative criteria is good. This is only going to be for the public good, or it can't be a substantial detriment to the public good, maybe a little bit of a detriment, but there might be something else positive, and you can get through with that. Right? So our zone, AR zone, has a certain description of what you can do and what its purpose is. So if you're going to get a variance, you have to look at our zone and say, well, this is the purpose. Are you violating what the purpose is? Because you can't. We won't pass the first one. What is our purpose? A residential district that respects and promotes the rural character of the township. The AR zone is intended to encourage the continuation of commercial agricultural operations and residential. Right? What are the bulk requirements? Minimum lot size of 1 acre, and 2.5 stories or 35 feet in height, and a maximum of 10%. We already kind of talked about that, but that's what it says. Right? And then here it is. Here's the uses. This is copied and pasted right from our ordinances. These are the things you can do. There's 7 of them in an AR zone. You can do farming and farm-related activities, including barns and packing houses. You can sell farm products. You could have a farm stand. Municipal buildings, cemeteries, detached single families. There's the residential, community residences, and then some conditional uses. If you do special things, you can do these extra things. You can have a school, a library, a church, or 55 plus development. I might be going to one of those pretty soon, right? So that's it. This is our AR zone. There's some extra stuff, but this is the gist of it, right? So does a variance, how does it relate to what the zone says? All right, so now let's look at the applicant, right? So Marino family has had a farming operation for many years. When I helped my parents build our house on Lincoln Road back in 1988, Russ Sr. was the mayor then. And they've had a very productive farm. And these are some of the broccoli and the greenhouses and whatnot. This is pre-2019. And then as this application and things have been changed, it's a different landscape now, right? So now there is an existing warehouse that has expanded and it has 30 bays, and there is truck traffic already happening on Vestry Road. So it's a very kind of difference. When you see a variance that is granted and the outcomes of it, we can really determine whether those criteria were met or not, right? Now that this has already been passed, this is already there, but the criteria that were put forth as the arguments about why having a commercial warehouse would be not making a detriment were in place. Okay, so this is kind of the background to the case that was going to be going before the March 11th meeting next week. Now that has been either postponed or pulled. We'll see what happens there. But this was going to be what was proposed. The existing warehouse is already in operation, and they were proposing this additional one, and they were asking for these things. So what was going to happen? Oh, and so this is the application. You can read it. This is what they say. We want to have these variances, and they have to kind of lay it out like that. Then this very interesting at the bottom of their list of all of the things that they asked for, they threw this one in. I call it the kitchen sink phrase. Not only do they want to have a higher building and a large, but they also want any and all other submissions and or design waivers and or variances or other relief that is necessary to build our building. So they want everything, right? And guess what? That is totally normal for a developer to do, is to ask for the moon, right? But it's our responsibility as a municipality to have our own professionals, to have our environmental commission, to have people review this and say, wait a second, we're not going to give you the moon. We're going to, we want to be a positive, have a positive relation here, but this is our interest, maintaining what is important for the integrity of the community. And that should be driving our decision making. Right? So it's kind of interesting. So you can actually see what the argument was going to be next Monday. They have that in their proposal. They say this is how we're going to address the positive criteria. And I'll let you. But some of their arguments are kind of interesting. Like a higher structure will look less industrial, thus promote a desirable visual environment. Right? So, but that's their job, is to make a case, because they have to do this for the law. Right? And then negative criteria, the first thing they say, it will not have any detrimental impact or effect on the neighboring properties. Okay? They can say that. That could be their opinion, right? But they're trying to sway the planning board into making the case. And the planning board should be critical about that. Say, okay, show me what you got. It will not seem out of place. No detrimental impact. The benefits of 60+ feet will outweigh any potential detriment, and it will serve as a better zoning alternative for the property. Right? This is going to be great stuff for my classes, right? To kind of show how and guess what? If they had the meeting next Monday, their professionals are going to make this seem like you're right, because they're good at this. They're professionals. This is their job, is to try to ask for the moon and see as much as they can get of it, right? So it's not surprising, but I kind of thought about, well, what would be the counter arguments for it if we had an environmental commission that was reviewing it. It violates a lot of the goals of the state municipal land use law. It's not a desirable visual environment. It's going to be a taller building, which means more volume, which means more truck traffic. Right? They can say, well, it's already approved for the use. No, but there's going to be more truck traffic if it's taller. Right? If it's larger on the lot, it's going to be a larger building, more truck traffic. So making those kind of connections and asking, where is the traffic study? There isn't one, which is really quite remarkable for a warehouse. Now, they might say, well, it's not the final plan. We'll have one then. But give us the permission first, and then we'll create the traffic study with the final plan. And that's kind of chicken and egg, right? How can you make a decision about giving a variance if you don't know what the traffic impact is going to be? Now, if they do a traffic impact, it has to be professionally done. They can't lie on that. But they could misrepresent it if they say, well, we don't really need a traffic study, which is what happened for the approval of the first building, right? So we had people, the public showed up to the meeting and said, the traffic for this proposed building is just not believable that it's only going to be 10 trucks. And their professionals said, well, we think it's going to be about 10 trucks a day. And I think that there has been some observations that it's not 10 trucks a day. It's quite substantially more than that, right? So this is where we have to have the ability to ask tough questions to any applicants of any proposal and make sure that they have the answers that are professionally done, right? So, these are just some of the things that, if this went to the meeting next Monday, you might have some counter arguments for now whether those kind of arguments will be met. I don't know. But the bottom line is that this proposal kind of clearly, I think, violates our master plan and our zoning ordinance. And that's what the land use law says. You can't violate what's already there. That's the whole idea of this. You want something special? Okay. But you can't damage what you already have. All right. So I'm surprised that people haven't fallen asleep yet, so I appreciate that. I'm going to try to keep moving forward here. This is moving forward past all this stuff. I want to get to the big picture here. I just want to finish up with the big picture here. Like, this is bigger than South Harrison or a warehouse in my backyard, which are all like important things. This is really a statewide and a regional and a South Jersey and a Gloucester County issue. When we think about the loss of New Jersey's farmland, New Jersey loses, over the last 35 years, as we've measured it, New Jersey is losing 10 football fields a day of prime farmland. Every single day for 35 years, 10 football fields a day. Right? This is not insignificant. So when we think about that and we think about those larger perspectives of this, how would the loss of, or how would a warehouse in the middle of a community that's trying to maintain its farming industry, its local farming, where people have already put their land into farmland preservation, can you farm as well when you're next to warehousing? Because this might not be the last one, right? It makes it very difficult. You have truck traffic competing with farm tractors and school buses and so forth. And if you put your land into farmland preservation and then you have a warehouse next to you, if you're in farmland preservation, you can sell it on the private market to another farmer. You can't develop it, right? So you can imagine somebody ready to retire selling it to a young farmer with a warehouse next to it. That's going to be a lower value farm for a new farmer to buy. So you're taking a hit to the farmland that's in preservation takes a hit by having warehousing that's mixed with this. And then what it does economically is it makes it be, if this variance is granted, right now the farmland preservation program uses housing development value as its means of valuing what kind of money they will give you to put it in preservation. They don't have it valued for warehousing. This is a completely different economic beast. This is an $8 billion multinational corporation, and we have that kind of money, it makes it really hard to compete with farmland preservation, right? So this kind of pulls the rug out of farmland preservation, because now if this goes through, and it's because of the change of zoning. If it was zoned industrial, then I wouldn't be making this argument. It's changing the zoning that I find really troubling, because now if this zoning is changed, then every other farm that's left that's in a residential zone will say, wait a second, I want my warehouse too. Right? I want my $8 million warehouse, because now it makes farmland preservation be much less attractive. And that's not good for anyone, because that just sprawls everything in many different places. So let me just kind of wrap up here with a look at the other environmental aspects, which I think are really, really unique about this particular property. So that was the big picture of farmland preservation in general. Right? What we have here is a different map. This is Google Earth here. This is showing, it's an older picture, so you don't see the full extra 3 acres that is now on this warehouse here. But what we do see is the marsh, the Oldman's Creek Marsh that is right behind it, and you really get a sense of where that marsh is. If I turn on a sketch of where the warehousing will be, you can see that's what's proposed, and here's the parking and so forth. We can get an idea of the layout here and its impact on Oldman's Creek and the environment. If we look at the endangered species mapping on NJ Map, the endangered species mapping shows that this is actually an area that is threatened endangered species, right? And so the landscape project is showing that there. We can see the mapping that does that here, all right? So this mapping is showing that all those criteria that it says where warehouses should go and shouldn't go, we fail all of them, right? Including the endangered species, including the wetlands of extraordinary value. It's an extraordinary value. It's a C1 stream, meaning it has a 300-foot buffer. All of these things are at play here with this property. And so those environmental species that are of interest, we have, for example, in that marsh, we have bog turtle habitat. Bog turtle is a threatened, it's on the national listing, right? It's a federally threatened species. Now the bog turtle lives in the bog, but everything that drains into the bog is really affecting that water quality. So we got to be thinking more like a watershed rather than an individual place. We have some of the other species there are upland grassland birds. For example, American kestrel or bobolinks or eastern meadowlarks. These are all species that are documented by the DEP as using this as habitat. And we are losing our grassland habitats at a very accelerated rate. So this mapping, and I'm trying to I'm trying to cram a 3-hour talk into a 1 hour. There's so much here. I hope that you can be inspired to come onto NJ Map and start exploring your own neighborhood and start seeing what the environment is like. Take a look at the areas that are slated for the warehousing, for other developments and so forth, and use this mapping for educating yourself and learning how to get to be more understanding of what's happening in our communities. I'm hoping that if the Environmental Commission is reconstituted here, we can do mapping sessions and workshops to show how the mapping can really help the environmental management of the town for these types of issues. So, you know, again, every time you put a warehouse on farmland, it is gone forever, right? It takes nature 500 to 1,000 years to make 1 inch of topsoil, and it takes a couple months for a warehouse or ill-placed development to ruin that topsoil forever. That topsoil is gone. One of the things that the applicant was saying is like, well, this is going to be more energy efficient to be a higher building. And I'm thinking like, and you've just covered the soils that do carbon sequestration, that do groundwater recharge, that are really maintaining the environmental quality of that marsh, that are slowing down flooding, right? The cost of destroying our open lands is just a cost that I don't think we can afford to pay. And I think that's why this particular project is particularly important. It's important for us as a community. It's important for the county, it's important for the state for this to be an example of how we can do it right. So I think with that, I've pretty much talked myself out, and I'm very much happy to take questions now. I want to thank you on behalf of me and Rowan and Katrina, and thank you for your patience, and I hope you learned something here that was helpful.
Before we have a question and answer session, take a break. Microphone? Okay, take a break. One thing I want to point out, this has become a very emotional issue for a lot of people. One thing we cannot afford to do is take our feelings out on the planning board. The planning board is a group of residents just like us. And I will tell you that I was the prime protester of the first warehouse that's across the street from me. The planning board, I will defend them forever. They just didn't know what their obligations and responsibilities were. The applicant brings in these hired professionals who say, oh, there's no impact. Well, the planning board has to trust those professionals unless they know differently. And in most cases, they don't. They don't see the site before they rule on it. They're not aware of the impact of what they're deciding. They're not aware that they have a responsibility to us as townspeople to stand fast on the master plan. So when you go to the township meetings, when you go to the planning board meetings, please be mindful of the feelings of the other people as well. The worst thing you can do, and you know yourself, if you get into an argument with somebody, the mind shuts down. You can't convince somebody who you're arguing with to see it your way. So keep the voice down, keep the comments down, don't attack them, but point out where you think they are not looking at it properly. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the Environmental Commission, John mentioned, the mayor appoints the Environmental Commission. That's got nothing to do with Joe Marino. That's the mayor's role. He appoints the Environmental Commission. By our township law, we are allowed to have 7 people on that commission. We right now have 2. And in talking to Mel Robertson, who has been on that Environmental Commission for many, many years, they haven't met in at least the last 2 or 3 years because there's only 2 people. So they really have no functioning environmental committee. If you're interested in doing so, call the township hall, tell them you'd like to volunteer for the environmental committee. And then the mayor has the obligation to appoint you. So apply for it. It's very important. It's very necessary. I've discovered in other towns, the Environmental Commission reviews every variance before the planning board ever sees it. We don't do that here because our environmental commission isn't working, okay? We have an obligation as township residents to get involved in our township, I won't even call it politics, our township laws and regulations. It's our responsibility. When we sit back and say, oh, they're taking care of it, well, then you've just given them the power to do whatever they want. And I'm as guilty as anybody. I've been in this town 40 years. And until recently, I had never been to a township meeting. All right? That has changed dramatically. I will be involved. I will support them. I will tell them where I think they're wrong. But they're fellow citizens like us, so let's be respectful of that. Yes, Lucy?
I do agree that we have to be respectful. I think that's important. But I don't agree with your position that, you know, they're just regular folks like us and that they don't know when they're being duped or if the information's incorrect and they just kind of have to go along with these lawyers. Excuse me, let me finish. I think that it's incumbent upon those officials, because they are officials, they're not elected but they're appointed, to become knowledgeable and to be able to execute their duties successfully and appropriately. So if they don't do that and they don't know the information, then they're complicit in this fraud that's been perpetuated on our community.
I agree with you 100%. All I'm saying is, let's not crucify them for past sins. Let's educate them on what the responsibility, yes, what the responsibility is. And most of them don't know that they have the responsibility to question these things. They have the responsibility, not just sit there and say, well, there's no impact. No. Prove to me that there is no impact. Prove what your point is. They have the responsibility to do that.
Correct.
Yes, the burden of proof is on the applicant, absolutely.
So these folks all take courses so that they can execute their duties. That's what we've been told, right, by the town council?
Unfortunately, they have 18 months to complete that course. So they can vote on a number of violations or variance requests without ever having been educated. That's the state law. They have 18 months.
As a lawyer, I'm going to say ignorance is no excuse for not following the law.
I agree. Yes, sir.
Don't we have a township engineer that reviews all the applications?
We do have a township engineer,
Who might that be?
Bach Engineering, out of Haddon Heights. They've been our township engineer for, I'm going to say, at least 10 to 20 years that I know of.
Who is the applicant's engineer? Do you know? Do we know? We must.
Colliers Engineering. Colliers right now, you may have seen their trucks. They're mapping Morrill Road for a paving project. So yeah, they are here. I will tell you, it was Colliers that the applicant used for this existing warehouse. Again, I don't want to recreate that wheel, but I will tell you, beyond the shadow of a doubt, the 10 trucks a day that they thought we would see, we're seeing in excess of 100. And if you haven't been on Vestry Road yet, please take a ride down and see what it really looks like. Yes?
My question would be, aren't there remedies that if you go beyond what's in the scope of your planning board approval, that it can be stopped? That's a legal question.
You would think so.
Well,
But where are the checks and balances? Who in our township is looking back and saying, wait a minute, this is not what we agreed to? Unfortunately, that I don't believe is happening. Yeah. And Heather was on the planning board, and she can attest that what I've just said, that they really don't know, and I don't mean that negatively, they really don't know what they are being asked to do because they haven't been trained properly.
that's where we need a civil engineer to represent us and a land use lawyer.
Yes,
Professionals represent
yes, yes.
And that's the intention with the engineer that's supposed to represent the township. But it's been Bach Associates for so long.
Well,
And the solicitor for the Planning and Zoning Board is also appointed by the mayor.
Right.
There is a tremendous amount of
power vested in the position of mayor.
Yes, thank you, Ed, for putting it that way. Yes. Yes,
So,
yes.
one other thing I wanted to point out, the township master plan that John so adequately said is so critical. That township master plan, it's been 10 years since it was last updated. And it is on the docket for this year to be updated. So we as residents need to make sure that that township master plan meets our specific needs and doesn't get appreciably changed. Again, Lineage pulled the application. There was no hearing on Monday night because they pulled the application, but they reserved the right to refile it later. Now, later could be next month, it could be 6 months from now, it could be after the township master plan has been changed to favor them. So just be aware that that's out there, and we need to be cognizant and on top of the changes to the master plan. Yes?
Do you know anything about what the process is, Ed, for that master plan revision? Will it be done in open meetings?
No. Bach Engineering decides what the master plan should be based on input from the township committee. Then it goes back to the planning board. The planning board ultimately will decide on what the new master plan looks like.
So it is politics, ultimately.
But there's a public process.
But there is a public piece of it. Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
No, I'm saying that, I mean, it'll show up on the township's website on, like, because I think it's 48 hours prior to the public meeting. So you should all be paying attention to the township's website and looking at the agenda of what's going to be on the agenda. And it may be nothing, but it could be the reapplication of this warehouse. It could be the first meeting of the master plan committee. It could be a lot of different things. So it'll show up on the agenda. You should go there and be a part of it, and you can volunteer to be a part of. And they may deny your participation, but you know, in most towns they accept some community input. And then it'll go through a process. It'll probably be a couple of months that they revise and they'll put up a draft out, and there'll be a first reading, and then all of you can give comment and say, wait a minute, you're changing this. It's going to change the whole character of the town. You know, we won't have 5 tractors out there. We'll have, 150 tractor trailers or whatever, and so there is a public process.
And the master plan was, as it's now written, was originally established in 2008. It was revised in 2014. So it's been 10 years since the last changes were made. And again, it behooves us as residents to be involved in our township government. The days of assuming that everybody's acting in your own best interest and you don't need to get involved, long gone, folks, long gone. We've seen too many instances in not only local government, state government, federal government, where if we don't act, if we don't make our voice heard, we're going to suffer the consequences. So, yes, sir.
Let me ask you a question. If Lineage decides not to go through variance, which they did, okay, what's to stop them with going proceeding what they have?
What's to stop them from what, John?
Proceeding what they have in hand.
Oh, well, the existing warehouse,
No, I'm talking about, it comes down to this.
building something that complies with
Yes.
35 feet, yeah?
Right.
35 feet and no more than 10%? Absolutely nothing at this point because they have the use variance. that was granted.
They got the green light there.
They have the green light to build a cold storage facility as long as it meets the township requirements. Now, having said that, it still needs to get past the planning board, and we still have input in the planning board. There is a public session at every zoning meeting where you have the right to stand up and voice your opinion. So it's not an automatic, like some people would have us believe, that they're going to build a warehouse there regardless. Not necessarily. We still have the final say as the public residents of the town.
And the last question I have is, how far is that 300 feet for that proximity of the building, the proposed building, to the Oldens Creek?
Well, that's something that is open for discussion. The DEP has reviewed the plans, and while the 300-foot buffer does actually encroach on the land. It doesn't encroach on the proposed building. So they are okay with that 300 feet. Now, the one question I asked, Fred and I had a conversation tonight about does that 300 feet as the crow flies, or is that 300 feet that follows the topography of the land? I don't know, and Fred doesn't know either. So that's a question that we need to get answered, because that wetlands back there, and if you've never been on Porches Mill / Lincoln Road there, every time we get a heavy rain, that road floods. Floods. I mean, I have a video that I can show anybody who wants to see it tonight. I have a video of a tractor trailer coming through a foot of water. You can't even see the road because it flooded. Now, if it's flooding, those bog turtles, and there is an endangered mussel as well in Oldman's Creek, they could be floating right out on the road and get run over by a truck. So that's another area where we need to make our voice heard. We need to let people know that this is a concerning issue. So, I'm sorry, John. Questions for John? Yes, sir.
And I would like to say,
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would like to say that back to the township, Bach Associates and what they've done over their years in power needs to be reviewed. And the waivers that they have submitted needs to be reviewed. And I also think that the solicitors for the Planning and Zoning Board, as well as for the Township Committee, their background needs to be reviewed. So I think that there's a lot that needs to be looked at a little more closely.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
This is the same in every township.
Yes.
The system is basically set up. The mayor picks who he wants and he gets what he wants.
Yes.
I've been a developer for 35 years. Every town I've ever worked in, they tell you what attorneys to use, they tell you what engineers to use, and you get what you want.
And how much money you gotta pay.
And that's how the system works. So unless you elect your own people to town council and to the mayor,
I'm glad you brought that up.
that's the only
You
way.
are, you are registered?
And such,
Yeah,
part
here's
of
what's
the
changed.
township
Go ahead.
budget.
We're doing as well for keeping this a rural farming community. It may not be that way.
Because I saw it.
That's what the elephant in the room really is.
Right. If you are registered to vote in South, a petition here for you to sign. And we've also been told that Carmen Malinaji and Barbara Sparks are running on the Democrat side. So we have the possibility to change our government structure in the coming election. So it's
So if you're
extremely
registered Republican
important.
or independent, you can sign this ballot if you want to see Dan,
Right.
the tally, run as Republicans.
And if
And
you,
then
if you
Carmen and
are a
Barbara.
Republican registered Democrat, talk to Lucy right here.
Yes.
She can put you in touch with the Democratic Party in town.
Lucy, raise your hand so people know who you are. Lucy.
Just briefly.
Yes.
On any application for a property, do we know if there are present aquifers flowing? Are they mapped out that there's an aquifer in that property?
Well, really, it depends on the specific site that you're talking about. There's different geologic formations. South Jersey is very sandy. Pennsylvania has different geologic, but every place it rains, there's an aquifer. Water trickles down into the geology and then it finds its way into groundwater. So some areas have more of a flow than others, but every place is an aquifer.
Does New Jersey map have a place where you can see the aquifers?
We do have groundwater recharge as one of our layers. Yes, I could show this here in our water theme and component layer, groundwater recharge right here. So you can get an idea of where the recharge rates are. Each of the different colors represents a different regime of soil absorptivity. So you can see that the wetlands kind of pop out But all of South Jersey is a sponge, really.
Anything that runs along Albans Creek, though, is considered pretty much recharge.
The whole creek is, this area where you see the big 300-foot buffer is because it's considered a C1 stream, which is water quality of highest order, right? So that makes it have a lower level of environmental pollution. It has a more pristine environment. It has some of these species like the freshwater mussel and the bog turtle. And so it has this special designation, but there's not a lot of 300-foot buffer C1 streams in South Jersey. Let me just quickly zoom out a little bit and give you an idea of what that looks like. Right. So the yellow there's Oldman's Creek. You can see it. There's a little bit of Salem Creek over here. There's little bits and pieces. We're very fortunate to have a little pristine stream valley that runs right through the southern part of our town. It's pretty unique. Now, in the Pine Barrens, there's more of them, and up in North Jersey, there's some as well. But in our region, Oldman's Creek kind of stands out as being a very important environmental asset.
And Oldman's Creek actually starts in Elk Township and goes all the way out to the Delaware River, which is why Fred is so interested in it. Because everything that gets washed into Oldman's Creek eventually ends up in the Delaware River. And that's what we need to be very, very careful of and cognizant of.
And just what John just said about how unique Oldman's Creek is and how it stands out in South Jersey as one of the only Category 1 streams, that's a perfect statement to say when the public meeting opens up. You don't have to come in and be a geologist or be a land use specialist or a mapper. You just have to come in and make a comment like that. Because it's so important, because if they approve this, most likely you'll challenge it. And you can only challenge and hold them accountable for information that's been shared in the public during the public process. So everything, even if your neighbor said exactly what you were going to say, they say this on sports radio, come in and say it again, and repeat it. And then all of what John just produced is like a rich treasure trove of public comment that you can watch again and say, that's important to me, let me write that down, and come in and stand up to the microphone and share.
Great point.
Any other questions for John, Fred? Yes.
Will this video be available for us all to review again?
Yes,
Yes.
it will be live. It'll be live on the website. It'll be not live, it'll be available to view just as it was tonight. It will
And
be
it's on
available to
YouTube,
view
too,
on the
right?
website.
And it'll be on YouTube as well.
Well, yeah, it'll be on the
So-
website via YouTube.
Is it the same link that we clicked on?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you know anybody on the planning board, you know any of the 5 councilmen, get them the link. Show them where the information is for them to be informed and hopefully make an informed decision. I will tell you again from personal experience, I live across the street from the existing one. And I can't believe that at the variance hearing I attended to fight it, the engineers actually stood up and said, no impact on property values, no impact on the neighborhood, no impact on anything. And I can tell you my property value dropped dramatically as soon as they put that first warehouse up. And if they put the second one up, it's gonna be in the toilet. So please, please, please get involved in township committee meetings. Attend. You don't have to say anything, but at least
No, you
be
do.
there.
You do.
Well, and the ideal is if you do. But let them know that you're there, that you're concerned, that you're watching what they're doing, because it's so important.
And can you
Yes.
tell everybody when the meetings are?
Yeah, the next township committee meeting is next Wednesday night, the 13th. Okay?
What's
So,
up?
7 o'clock in the Borough Hall. So please, please show up and listen to what they have to say.
All
So-
of the meetings are on the website.
Yes.
They're all on the website, so if you go to the website,
You're
you
sitting
will see
on-
them listed. If they're canceled, you'll see them canceled, but you'll see everything else. And if they're postponed, you'll see all those dates. We have them on the nosohawarehouses.com website.
One other thing, on Vestry Road, there are only 8 houses. Okay, it's a 1.25 miles long, there's 8 houses. There's one dairy farm that is farmland preserved. Hasn't been a dairy farm, an active dairy farm for at least 6 years. But it was recently purchased by another young farmer who is raising beef cattle. And he bought the property in June, and in November, we find out, that they're proposing this new warehouse. He wants to sell. He wants to get out. If they're going to build a warehouse there, it's going to impact his operation. So just what Fred said about warehouse next to a farm decreases the value. It's clear that that's what's happened. If 150 tractor trailers are going up and down Vestry Road, what do you think those cows are going to do? Those cows aren't going to be prime beef anymore, guaranteed.
Hey, before.
Yes.
Okay, Vestry Road's been, just touch on the price, the cost to build that road, and what's the status on, what's the status on Portugal Road with this thing being tabled?
Again, according to the Township Master Plan, every road in town, with the exception of Porches Mill, is rated with a 4-ton weight limit. Okay, that means trucks over 4 tons shouldn't be on that road unless they are making a delivery to someone on the road. So the trash trucks, they're legal even though they're more than 4 tons because they're stopping at every place. But tractor trailers should not be on Porches Mill. Porches Mill is a 2-ton weight limit. 2 tons. I mean, most cars can't even manage 2 tons. Porches Mill is going to be repaved, we think, in the very near future. Vestry Road was repaved in 2020. The mayor was very happy with the fact that he got $1.5 million from the state transportation fund, which is great, except it cost $1.6 million to repave the road. So guess who paid the other $133,000? We all did.
We did.
Okay? And that road benefited Lineage Logistics. Okay? Lineage should have paid for that road, and they didn't because they bought the warehouse, the land from Joe, 2 months after the repaving was done. Okay? If that had happened sooner, Lineage would have had to pay that entire cost to repave that road. That wouldn't have cost us, the taxpayers, anything. Okay? That's not the case now. If this new warehouse passes, they're going to have to widen roads, they're going to have to put up traffic lights, they're going to have to put up all kinds of things. The warehouse will pay for that, initially. But guess who pays for it to maintain it? We do. Okay? So, yes? Sure.
Has there been any input from the neighboring municipalities regarding the lack of a traffic study and the impacts of traffic going through the local roads surrounding?
Technically, no. I will tell you that a number of us have testified at Harrison Township, at Piles Grove, at Woodstown. I'm going to an Elk Township meeting next week to let them know that this is happening because most of them have no idea. They're not aware of it. It's funny because I talked to a woman in Woodstown, Checker put me in touch with, and she is irate. She was right on Main Street in Woodstown. She is irate because of the number of trucks that are coming up Main Street, coming up 45, turning on Lincoln, and making their way to Vestry. It affects everybody. It's not a South Harrison problem. It affects us all. We have people that are helping the steering committee that we're working to defeat this, from Woolwich that are helping us defeat it, from Woodstown that are helping us defeat it. There are people all over, not just in South Harrison, that recognize Pennsville, that recognize this is not just a South Harrison issue. It's a South Jersey issue. Look at Logan Township. Look at 322. And those warehouses are going all the way out to Kingsway and beyond.
Look at 40.
Route 40, yes.
Right there, right there.
And if you've driven through Carney's Point at all, right near Carney's Point High School, there is a huge warehouse going up.
Excuse me, Ed, too, I
Yeah.
think it's important to mention that we have been supported by local media
Yes,
also. And I
Yes.
think if anybody has any connections with any local media, it would be really important for you to reach out to them to share what's going on here, because even if they've heard from us once, if they hear it from more people, that's better.
and Joe Holden from CBS 3 did a piece for us back in November when the first meeting was canceled. Joe Holden has been on this from the get-go. He's been out here 3 times in the last week. He called me today when we heard that it had been canceled, and he was dumbfounded. He said, I had such a tremendous impact piece, I was getting ready to run, and now I can't run it. But it's Joe Riffet's over here.
Yeah, but we've been in touch with several different media outlets, and there's some still planning to run their stories.
Good.
They're tweaking them a little bit. There's still some.
Joe Riffet's over here, worked for Channel 6 as a film editor, and he's produced a number of good vignettes for us. That two of them have been posted so far? 3, okay. 3 of them have been posted, 3 more in the works.
And the new ones have music.
So take a look. There's a lot of people. This has been a team effort, folks. You have no idea how tremendous the talent is in this township. The people that have pulled together, the people that have done tremendous research. Lucy, Jen, just over and over. It's Mary and Nancy. Nancy's going to the Gloucester County Planning meeting tomorrow night. This is bigger than South Harrison, and we are fortunate to have so many talented people here that are helping us bring this to light. So, yes, Fred.
I have just a few points. The one thing is, when like lineage would, if they got approved, they only have to pay a percentage of the road improvements and the traffic lights and stuff. It may not be the entire cost. We thought about a project up in Warren County, and the developer was only required to spend like, I don't know, $350,000, and he gregariously offered $500,000, which would have been 1 light, but there were 6 other lights downstream on the road that all had, the taxpayers were all gonna have to pay. So so they won't pay the full amount, for that. That's one. The second, and there's just 3 more, is another way that when we go on the 13th, if everybody's got a green shirt on, then you don't even have, then your shirt is being your voice. So if they look out and see a sea of green shirts, and probably that helps go and pay for the attorney and that sort of thing too. The second thing is if you know where the planning board members live, that's a good strategy, is to put the signs, the no warehouse signs, flood their street. So every time they come into their house or leave their house, they're seeing everybody's voice. So if you know where they live, put more of the no warehouse signs. And then the last thing is, if you do apply as an environmental commission member, make sure you put it in writing, because it sounds like maybe if you just call them up and do it verbally, somebody might forget. So if you do it in writing, and there's probably an application form on the township's website, how can I volunteer for the community? And just so there's a documentation that somebody can't say, oh, well, we didn't get any applicants, well, you got 37 of them.
Excellent. Anyone else?
I
Yes.
have a question. I'm near 538, next to the other cold storage.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, they had a 10-year tax abatement. Because I have seen on Facebook, people were talking about, oh, this is gonna bring all these ratables. They don't bring any ratables. Am I correct in that?
Yes, you're correct on that. Yes. And I'm glad, I think that's a good point to bring up, because I think it's a big fallacy that people believe that business brings ratables.
Okay.
Townships like ours, and it's not true.
For those of you who haven't seen my post on Facebook a while back, if you live in South Harrison, 9% of your taxes go to the township. The other 91% of the taxes you pay go to Kingsway, go to South Harrison School, go to Gloucester County Library, Gloucester County Open Space. So the $9,200 a year I pay in taxes, it works out to about $9,000 that goes to South Harrison. Okay? So the idea that it brings in all these ratables, don't believe it. The warehouse that's there right now pays $298,000 in taxes. Okay? Sounds like a lot of money. $28,000 of it goes to South Harrison. The rest of it goes elsewhere. So for $28,000, we're going to have to, Vestry Road repaving was a 10-year project. It's got a 10-year life. At $1.63 million, that's $163,000 a year to maintain that and repave it in 10 years' time. And yet that warehouse pays $28,000 to the township. So anybody tells you that ratables are a good thing, question it. Question it. Because it's not what you think it is. Everybody thinks, oh, that's a big tax boom. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. So, other questions? Yes.
I just wonder if you'd be able to make a statement in regards to these speculative warehouses that are built. So they're built, there's no tenants, lease signs are up for a long time, or somebody moves in for a short period of time, like they seem to do on 40 and 322, with multiple warehouses that are empty. There's no cap, I guess, on how many of these can be built. Seems like a huge problem.
Yeah, I don't have expertise on that per se, but I have just kind of personal interest, and I know that there are huge multinational venture funds that are just, hedge funds that are doing, like, it's the same thing as like real estate in New York City. It's some of those skyscrapers in Manhattan, they're completely empty, right? They are, so I can't speak to that with any kind of knowledge, but there are definitely empty warehouses. So there is forces larger than just the demand for the logistics.
It becomes a real estate liability for them and not an investment for them. So they can write it off.
Yeah.
Follow the money.
Any other questions?
I do want to quickly just say that I don't want to, I want to follow back into the farmland preservation aspect to it, because the State Agricultural Development Committee, they are working on a new set of programs that are going to be more competitive and allow for things like ecosystem services and things that are not just about growing the products, but also what else the farms actually contribute. So I don't want to minimize the farmland preservation. Like, here is South Harrison. We're doing really well with farmland preservation. And you can see the Merino property is a donut hole in an otherwise sea of yellow, which is farmland preservation. And if we look at our modeling for where the best farmland preservation land is, it's colored blue in this map here, right? So these areas would be excellent to add to farmland preservation, and you want to get some of that county money back, put it into farmland preservation, and we get our county dollars helping to fund that. So I feel like I want to be part of this, is to help really encourage the remaining lands that could be in farmland preservation. It's going to be a good deal for the community and a good deal for them, because it's really complicated to develop, and you might not actually make a profit if you sell to a developer. So I just wanted to kind of end with that, a real positive note.
It's important, though, that everybody understands, because I don't think everybody understands that when a property owner has to be willing to put their land into preservation. A county, a state, an entity cannot force them to do that. And so I do think there is some confusion about that. So the owner of the property has to be willing to put it into preservation.
It's completely voluntary.
Yes, it's
and I have to say, we have the most successful farmland preservation program in the country. We have 2,800 farms, 2,900 farms now, right? So it is working on a volunteer basis. They do not force anyone. It is really, but it works. It's working. These maps that we're making are filling in year after year, and I think that is a really good strategy for ensuring what we're talking about. So just wanted to plug that in. But thank you so much for hanging out and staying with us. This has been a long night and a lot of information, and I hope that you feel like you have been informed. I know I have. Thank you, Ed. Thank you.